Hello, everyone. Welcome. Hi, I'm Oliver.
Hi, I'm Lily.
Welcome to Science in Easy English.
With Oliver and Lily.
Can animals really talk?
Yeah, so today's mission is to dive into a massive stack of sources. We have everything from cutting-edge ethology research to AI white papers and, historical cognitive science studies.
Right. We are setting out to answer a centuries-old question, one you probably asked yourself while just staring at a pet. Where exactly is the line between animal communication and human language?
Such a big question.
It is. And more importantly, is artificial intelligence about to completely erase that line?
Which is just wild to even think about.
Okay, let's unpack this. For centuries, humans drew a hard, uncompromising line between ourselves and the rest of the animal kingdom. It was essentially an exercise in moving the goalposts to protect our own ego.
Yeah, like first we claimed animals couldn't feel pain.
Which science proved wrong.
Then we claimed they lacked consciousness or complex thought.
And that theory fell apart too. So the final impenetrable fortress became language. In the 1960s, a linguist named Charles Hockett actually formalized this fortress. He created a strict list of design features to define exactly what makes human language special.
And to show why animal communication systems fundamentally fail to meet the standard. Breaking down those features historically is crucial because they form the bedrock of the scientific divide.
Right. Hockett's features were designed to separate biological instinct from true cognitive generation.
For decades, the scientific consensus was rigidly clear on this. Animals communicate purely based on immediate context. A bird screeches because a predator is visually present right then and there.
Or a dog barks because someone is literally at the door.
Exactly. But humans have language, which means we can manipulate abstract concepts.
We really tried to force animals to learn our specific version of communication to prove this divide, too. The sources extensively cover the famous 1970s experiments with a chimpanzee.
Oh, Nim Chimpsky.
Yes, jokingly named Nim Chimpsky, which was a direct play on the linguist Noam Chomsky. Researchers spent years aggressively teaching Nim sign language in a human environment.
And he did learn quite a bit, right?
He eventually learned over 100 signs, yeah. But the ultimate conclusion from the lead psychologist was incredibly dismissive. They determined Nim wasn't using true language. He was mostly just reacting to his teacher's subtle cues to get a reward.
So not spontaneously creating layered, complex thoughts.
Well, right. He was communicating absolutely, but it fell short of Hockett's rigid rules.
Which established a baseline assumption that held for half a century. You simply cannot teach an animal true language. But recently, that assumption has been aggressively challenged.
And not by scientists in a sterile lab.
No, by the pets sitting right in our living rooms.
Yeah.
You have probably seen the viral phenomenon of pet button boards online.
Oh man, they are everywhere.
They really are. It started gaining immense traction around 2019. A speech pathologist named Christina Hunger started using assistive communication devices, those plastic soundboards with recordable buttons, with her dog, Stella.
Which makes perfect sense given our background.
Exactly. Her reasoning was incredibly straightforward. She uses these exact devices to help young children acquire language. So why not see what a puppy can do with the same acoustic interface?
And Stella ended up learning over 50 words.
The trend exploded from there. You look at the sources and see accounts like Alexis Devine and her sheepadoodle, Bunny.
Bunny has roughly 8.5 million followers on TikTok.
It's unbelievable. You watch these videos, and the dog is supposedly pressing buttons to hold full conversations.
But as someone reading these sources, my first instinct is operant conditioning. Aren't these dogs just pressing buttons to get a treat? Isn't this just a modern version of the clever Hans effect?
The horse that could do math.
Right. The horse in the early 1900s that supposedly did arithmetic, but was really just reading his handler's subconscious body language to know exactly when to stop tapping his hoof.
What's fascinating here is that the scientific community initially had that exact same skepticism. They rolled their eyes and cited clever Hans immediately. But the data from rigorous academic studies is starting to tell a fundamentally different story.
This is where it gets really dense, but so cool.
Federico Rossano, a cognitive scientist at UC San Diego, launched a massive citizen science study to bypass the limitations of small lab experiments.
Hmm.
We're talking about tracking 10,000 dogs and 700 cats across 47 different countries.
That has to be the largest animal communication study ever attempted.
It is, and to counteract the clever Hans effect, the methodology required continuous 24/7 video monitoring in the home. They also implemented strict controls where owners were occasionally blinded to certain cues.
The parameters of that study are wild, and the results directly challenge Charles Hockett's old rules. Let's look at the linguistic feature Hockett called productivity, or creativity.
The ability to invent new phrases effortlessly.
Exactly. In human linguistics, the sources mention the classic WUG test. Have you heard of this?
Yeah, it's a staple in linguistics.
Yeah.
If I tell you, here is a wug,
No.
now there are two of them,
You instantly know to say, there are two WUGs. You are applying the internal rules of language to a totally unfamiliar element. The consensus was always that animals don't do this. As one of the articles brilliantly puts it, there are no WUGs in the wild.
but Rossano's study captured dogs doing exactly that, generating novel, open-ended meanings. For instance, one dog in the study did not have a dedicated button for ice.
Okay.
So to ask for an ice cube, the dog actively combined the buttons for water and bone.
Water boat.
Yes, that is a spontaneous, creative combination of known concepts to describe an unknown concept. And the definitive proof that it wasn't a random accident is what happened next. As soon as the owner bought an actual ice button and added it to the board, the dog completely abandoned the invented waterbone phrase.
They exclusively used ice.
Right. They understood the efficiency of the new vocabulary.
That completely upends the traditional model of animal communication. It also directly challenges another of Hockett's rules, displacement.
Remind us what displacement is.
It's the ability to talk about things that are not immediately present, discussing the past, the future, or things hidden from view. There is an incredibly poignant example with Bunny, the famous TikTok dog. She had an incident where she pressed the buttons mad and ouch.
Which are very abstract concepts for a dog.
Extremely. When her owner investigated, she found that Bunny had a painful foxtail burr stuck deep in her paw. The dog was literally communicating an invisible internal state of pain that the owner could not visually see.
We also see clear evidence of displacement in the way these dogs negotiate time. Rossano's team observed a dog pressing the button for pool. The owner, not wanting to go outside yet, responded by pressing later.
And the dog didn't just accept that.
No, the dog immediately countered by pressing now. The owner pressed later again, and the dog insisted now. That is a contextual, temporal negotiation.
The dog is demonstrating an understanding of the future versus the present.
Which shatters the idea that animals are trapped in an immediate reactive state.
To build on that, my absolute favorite detail from the sources highlights a behavioral quirk that proves intentionality. Dogs, much like human toddlers, apparently go through a poop phase.
A poop phase.
Yes, they figure out the button for poop and they just want to talk about poop constantly. It is genuinely funny, but it carries deep scientific weight. It proves they aren't just pressing buttons as a transactional lever to get a food reward or to please their owners.
Sometimes they just want to initiate a specific topic of conversation because they find it amusing.
They have agency.
Which requires us to ground our perspective a bit. As canine researcher Clive Wynne points out in the material, we have to be careful not to romanticize this. We shouldn't fall into the trap of thinking there is a human mind trapped in a dog's body, desperately trying to get out.
Right.
Inside a dog is a dog's mind. But what these rigorous studies are proving is that their unique cognitive abilities, their capacity to grasp abstract concepts and demonstrate intentionality, are incredibly sophisticated.
Think about how you communicate with your own pets. You probably have a deeply intuitive language with them already. A certain look, a specific whine, a nudge of the nose.
Yeah.
The button boards aren't magically giving them language.
The buttons are just providing an acoustic interface that we humans can easily decode.
Exactly. We're finally giving them a medium that translates their existing cognition into our phonetic world.
Bridging that gap in our living rooms is one thing, but if our domestic pets, who have co-evolved with us for thousands of years, are showing these hidden depths, we have to ask what is happening out in nature. far away from human influence and our plastic buttons.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because recent studies observing wild animals in their natural habitats are completely shattering Hockett's old rules. Let's look at wild chimpanzees.
For decades, primatologists believed that primate alarm calls were just hardwired singular emotional outbursts. A chimp gets scared, it makes a noise.
But researchers have recently documented that chimps actually combine their calls with deliberate structure. They will use a specific hoot followed immediately by a pant.
The order matters.
The order strictly matters. That specific combination predicts collective actions by the group, like moving to a new foraging area, in a way that the hoot or the pant alone does not. It might not be full-blown human syntax, but it is undeniably compositional. They are building meaning through sequence.
And if that pushes the boundary, a recent study published in the journal eLife completely obliterates it. Evolutionary psychologist Adriano Lamera and his team spent years meticulously recording and studying wild orangutans in the dense forests of Borneo and Sumatra.
Such difficult terrain to work in.
Extremely. But through deep acoustic analysis, they discovered that these apes use recursive, self-embedded vocal motifs.
Recursion. In linguistics, that was always considered the holy grail of human exceptionalism. But to clarify for anyone who hasn't taken a deep dive into cognitive science lately, recursion is the ability to nest a concept within another concept of the same kind.
It is placing a sentence inside a sentence.
Like saying, the dog, which chased the cat that caught the mouse, was barking.
Precisely. It is structurally complex layering. Lamera's team found that the orangutan's long calls possess 3 hierarchical levels of nested rhythmic units. They are literally placing a distinct vocal pattern inside another vocal pattern of the exact same kind.
Finding this in wild orangutans shatters the 70-year-old scientific dogma that recursion is a uniquely human cognitive trait.
It strongly suggests that the computational foundation for complex language didn't just spontaneously mutate in early humans. It exists in other great apes and likely evolved gradually from a shared ancestor millions of years ago.
What I find so compelling about that is how it forces us to reevaluate species we thought we understood. And it's not just primates. The Earth Species Project has been doing fascinating work with wild crows.
Crows are notoriously intelligent.
Very. But their acoustic world is incredibly difficult to study because standard microphones set up in a forest miss the vast majority of their quiet, close-range social chatter. To solve this, researchers deployed tiny mini biologers onto the crows.
Mini biologers.
Yeah, we're talking about microscopic backpacks fitted with highly sensitive microphones and accelerometers that track every physical movement and subtle vocalization throughout the bird's day.
The methodology of using those biologers unlocked an entirely unseen world. By capturing all these nuanced daily interactions, researchers discovered that crows use vocalizations to track incredibly complex social relationships.
The acoustic patterns of their sounds actually change depending on exactly who they are interacting with within the flock.
This suggests they are actively remembering past interactions, who shared food, who was aggressive, and they are constantly adjusting their future alliances based on that history. They are essentially navigating highly complex political landscapes using subtle variations in sound.
Which perfectly transitions us into the technology that is making these massive wild discoveries possible. We are generating more audio data from the natural world than human researchers could analyze in 1,000 lifetimes.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the introduction of artificial intelligence is fundamentally shifting the entire field of ecology. For decades, ecologists could only observe animals from the outside, watching their physical movements.
The primary scientific question was always, what did the animal do?
But AI is allowing us to process millions of hours of audio and find hidden structural patterns that the human ear physically cannot detect. Because of AI, the core question of ecology has evolved into, what did the animal mean?
One of the sources ties this technological leap beautifully to the concept of the umwelt. The science journalist Ed Young wrote an entire book exploring this idea. The umwelt is the unique, hidden sensory world that every specific animal inhabits.
As humans, we arrogantly assume our perception of the world is the objective reality. but we only perceive a tiny sliver of it.
We can't see ultraviolet light like a bee.
We can't sense magnetic fields like a migrating bird.
And we can't use echolocation like a bat. Imagine trying to watch a complex 3D movie, but you don't have the 3D glasses. You know something intricate is happening on the screen, but it just looks like a blurry mess. AI is finally acting as those glasses, giving us a mathematical tool to decode the acoustic umwelts of other species.
A perfect example of AI acting as a decoder ring is the groundbreaking work by Project CET with sperm whales. Sperm whales possess the largest brains on Earth, and they communicate in the pitch-black depths of the ocean using rapid, rhythmic sequences of clicks called codas.
For a long time, marine biologists knew they clicked, but the complexity was totally opaque to us. Project CEI researchers took massive, decades-long data sets of whale codas and fed them into advanced machine learning algorithms.
The algorithms mapped the acoustic topography of these sounds and discovered that these clicks aren't just repetitive sonar pings. They have incredibly deep context and combinatorial structure.
The AI found that the whales actively use microsecond variations in rhythm, tempo, rubato, and ornamentation to alter the meaning of the codas.
The AI even identified specific acoustic properties within the click sequences that remarkably resemble human vowels.
Vowels.
This means their communication system is exponentially more elaborate and layered than we ever hypothesized. By mapping these intricate coda patterns directly to observed physical behaviors like a dispersed pod suddenly reuniting or the group changing their diving formation to hunt the AI, can currently predict the behavioral context of the whales with nearly 80% accuracy.
We are literally learning to read their intentions. It is like uncovering a biological Rosetta Stone for the ocean. And the Earth Species Project is building similar massive AI tools for all of nature, not just whales.
They recently announced a flagship AI model called Natural LM Audio. It is the first large-scale audio language model built specifically for the animal kingdom. And the methodology behind how it learns is revolutionary.
It relies on self-supervised learning.
Right. Traditional AI models usually require humans to meticulously label the data first, like manually tagging thousands of photos to teach an AI what a stop sign looks like. But with animal communication, we don't know the labels. We don't know what a specific bird chirp means.
Natural M Audio gets around this by just listening to vast, raw oceans of audio. Birdsong, whale clicks, monkey calls. It learns by predicting the next sound in a sequence, effectively finding the internal structural logic and grammar of the audio all on its own, without any human bias.
The capabilities of a self-supervised model like that are staggering. Natural LM Audio can distinguish the specific life stage of an animal just from the subtle timbre of its voice.
It can listen to a dense, chaotic recording of a rainforest and accurately count the number of individual animals present.
It is even being deployed in critical conservation efforts to help endangered Hawaiian crows. These specific crows have been raised entirely in captivity for decades to prevent extinction.
But conservationists are deeply worried they've actually lost critical elements of their natural vocabulary because they have no wild elders to learn from.
So AI can analyze historical recordings of wild crows, compare them to the captive birds, and help us understand exactly what vocabulary they are missing.
We could potentially use AI to teach them how to be wild crows again before releasing them into the wild.
It is an incredibly powerful, deeply hopeful application of the technology. We can use our ultimate linguistic tool to help restore an ecosystem. But with that unprecedented power comes a profound, almost terrifying responsibility.
So, what does this all mean? Why should you, listening to this deep dive right now, care about the structural analysis of whale vowels or the fact that a dog can negotiate for pool time? Well, according to a recent global survey conducted by the Earth Species Project, 70% of people worldwide strongly want to understand what animals are thinking and feeling.
There is a universal, deeply rooted human desire to reconnect with the natural world, to acknowledge that animals have rich inner lives, and as the science is definitively proving, their own distinct cultures.
It is a beautiful shift in perspective.
This raises an important question, however, and it serves as a critical guardrail we must establish right now. Listening is not a neutral act. As we rapidly build these non-human animal communication technologies, we run a massive risk of flattening rich, alien communication systems into simplistic, anthropocentric concepts.
If we force a whale's multi-layered coda or a crow's political caw into the rigid linear box of human language translation, we might completely misunderstand what they are actually conveying.
We have to violently resist the urge to make them sound like us, and instead do the hard work of learning to understand them on their own terms, inside their own umwelt.
Beyond the philosophical risk, there are very real, very dark ethical dangers here. Translation can easily become a weapon.
Like with poaching.
Think about the implications. If an AI model successfully decodes the intricate communication network of wild African elephants, allowing us to know exactly when a herd is planning a migration or signaling a physical vulnerability,
What happens when that smartphone app inevitably falls into the hands of poachers?
we would be handing them an omniscient radar system to hunt endangered species with devastating, unstoppable efficiency.
Translation as a form of extraction and exploitation is a terrifying prospect. That is exactly why organizations like Project CET have preemptively partnered with legal scholars. They're actively working with the Moth Project at NYU Law to explore the complex legal implications of this AI research before the technology becomes ubiquitous.
Now, we should be clear, we aren't taking a stance or endorsing the idea of animal personhood here. We are strictly reporting on the fascinating legal arguments our sources are bringing to the table. But it is a wild legal frontier.
If scientific data undeniably proves that sperm whales possess complex language, distinct cultural knowledge passed down through generations, and sophisticated societal structures, does that alter their standing under international law?
Could decoding their speech be the definitive turning point that finally grants them legal rights, or even legal personhood in certain jurisdictions? If an AI translation confirms that a whale is essentially communicating, this commercial shipping lane is destroying our home.
Do we have a legal binding obligation to listen and change our behavior? It fundamentally threatens the historical legal distinction that separates humans from property.
If an entity possesses language and culture, they possess agency, and the law struggles to categorize agents as mere resources.
We have covered an incredible amount of ground in this deep dive. We started with the rigid, ego-driven linguistic rules of the 1960s that built an impenetrable wall between humans and the rest of the animal kingdom.
We saw that wall start to crack in our own living rooms, with dogs actively combining concepts to invent words, negotiating for time, and telling us they are experiencing invisible pain.
We watched the wall completely crumble in the wild, with orangutans utilizing recursive, self-embedded vocal structures and chimps demonstrating compositional syntax.
And finally, we explored how self-supervised AI is sweeping away the remaining debris, mapping the hidden acoustic topography of whales and crows, proving conclusively that the line separating us from them isn't a wall at all, it is a gradient.
A gradient filled with vast intelligence and alien culture that we, sitting in our tiny slice of the sensory world, are only just beginning to perceive.
But I want to leave you with a brand new thought to mull over, something to critically explore on your own after this deep dive ends. As this AI technology leaps forward, mapping and decoding animal communication, the next logical technological step after listening is talking back.
Generating synthetic animal calls and broadcasting them into the wild.
Exactly the danger. If we use AI to interject our own synthetic, human-generated messages into a pod of sperm whales or a flock of wild crows, what are the irreversible consequences?
Do we risk accidentally introducing acoustic misinformation into a pristine communication network?
Could we permanently alter or even inadvertently destroy the delicate ancient culture of an entire species just by trying to say hello? In the end, once we aggressively insert ourselves into their conversation, is true, untainted observation of the natural world even possible anymore?
It is a profound, paradigm-shifting ethical dilemma. We have spent centuries trying to figure out if animals are talking to us. Now we have to figure out if we actually have the right to talk back. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep your ears open to the wild world around you.
You never know what they might be saying.